Hey everyone. So I was in the hallway just outside my classroom door during passing period and witnessed a scholar smack another scholar straight across the face. The scholar who got hit looked completely confused and just had absolutely no idea what happened. Just before class started and after the hallway cleared out, I talked to both scholars separately in my private reflection square. As I listened to both sides of the story, it became clear that the situation started because one scholar accidentally brushed up against another moving through the very crowded hallway. The scholar who reacted believed it was intentional and immediately responded physically. The other scholar wasn't trying to start a conflict and didn't even realize there had been a problem. As we walked through the incident step by step, it became clear that the scholar had convinced himself that the contact was deliberate, even though there was no evidence to support the conclusion. I pointed out that his reaction was like bringing a gun to a knife fight, and then pointed out there wasn't even a knife. He just wasn't reacting to what actually happened. He was reacting to what he believed happened. That experience is one reason I chose cognitive behavioral techniques for this presentation. Cognitive behavioral techniques are based on the idea that thoughts, feelings, and behaviorals are all connected. The way scholars interpret situation often determines how they respond. If a scholar assumes someone's disrespecting them, excluding them, or trying to start a problem, they'll likely react differently than if they saw the same situation as an accident or a misunderstanding. One strategy I use regularly is the guided reflection through what I call the reflection square. Instead of focusing only on consequences, the conversation focuses on understanding what happened and what could be done differently next time. My questions are always simple. I stand there, I kind of pop my back a little bit like this, and I say, what happened? What were you thinking? How did your actions affect others? What could you do differently next time? Looking back, many of these questions align to cognitive, behavioral, and problem solving strategies discussed in this research. Rather than simply telling the scholar what they did wrong, the goal is to help them examine their assumptions, understand how their thinking influenced their behavior, and consider an alternate response for future situations. This slide show, this slide shows the basic idea behind cognitive behavioral techniques. A situation happens, a scholar has a thought about the situation, the thought creates an emotional response, and the emotional response drives the behavior. In the hallway example, the thought wasn't someone accidentally bumped into me. His thought was he did it on purpose. That thought created anger. It led to the slap. If we can help scholars change their assumptions, consider alternate explanations, and slow down before reacting, we can often change the outcome before the problem behavior occurs. Researchers such as Bandura and Beck have written extensively about how our thoughts influence emotions and behaviors, which is one of the foundations of cognitive behavioral approaches. The good news is that these strategies are supported by research. Across multiple studies, researchers have found improvements on social skills, self regulation, peer relationships, and problem solving when scholars receive explicit instruction, opportunities to practice, feedback, and ongoing support. One thing that stood out uh, for me was literature that these interventions don't just focus on stopping problem behaviors, they focus on teaching replacement skills that scholars can continue using for future situations. This is important because eventually we want scholars to solve problems independently rather than relying on adults to solve them. An important part of intervention is determining whether it's actually working. Progress monitoring helps us make decisions based on data rather than assumptions. Depending on how the depending on the behavior being addressed, we might use ABC charts, frequency counts, direct observation, or self-monitoring checklists. For example, if a scholar frequently reacts aggressively during peer conflicts, we might collect the baseline data before the intervention to compare it to data collected afterward. The goal is to see whether the scholar is actually applying the skills being taught. For me, this connects back to the hallway example. The problem wasn't the slap, the problem was the assumption. If the cognitive behavioral techniques help the scholar slow down, question assumptions, and consider alternate explanations, then we might see fewer conflicts, stronger peer relationships, and better decision making over time. So, very shocked that this discussion was due this evening. I did start working on it on Monday and Tuesday, and then I started on my discussion post for another class and then looked at these discussion posts. I'm like, oh, they're due all right now. It was an exciting day. We had lots of reflection square time because I had a substitute para educator that wanted to try and teach a lesson, and he taught music and math, beautiful lesson. But our reflection square circle constantly asked, why are you being mean to the guy? He just wants to see if he wants to be a teacher. You're not even being graded on this. And therapist goes, the bean bags are gone. And so it's been an exciting week and lots of assignments due this week too. I'm looking forward to seeing your posts and posting on yours. And I really like the kind of video idea because then we get to see each other. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.